In this series of videos, we've been talking all about receivables. In our last video, we learned how to write off a receivable. And now a question I always get in my classes is, what happens if you've written off the receivable and then the person comes in and pays the bill? So you've given up on them. You've said, I'm never going to get that money. And then they turn around and pay you. What a wonderful problem to have, right? Because you've given up on getting some money. You get the money you weren't expecting to get. It's like a windfall. What do you do about that as an accountant? Well, first of all, this is great news, and it's great news to you. If your professor tests you on this, it's great news because it's not too complicated, especially after having watched this video. You're going to be an expert in it. So let's say we have a company, ABC company, just a made-up company, and they owed us $1,000. We had a $1,000 receivable from them. We did some work for them, and now we want to give up. Right? We want to write off their receivables. So let's just, again, I'm making up dates here. Let's say it's January 15th. So January 15th, we decide we want to give up on their accounts receivable, and their account receivable was $1,000. So to give up on account receivable, you credit that accounts receivable. So we're going to credit AR from ABC company, and that's for $1,000. Our debit here, as you'll recall, is not to bad debt expense. That's the whole purpose of this chapter, is to show you that we set up allowances. Now we're going to use our allowance. And how do you use an allowance? You debit it. So you debit your allowance for doubtful accounts. I've just been calling that allowance for short, but of course you know that's allowance for doubtful accounts. Your professor might say AFDA. That's fine too. Okay, so we've written off their account. And under most circumstances, that's the end, right? ABC company never comes in. Maybe they've gone bankrupt. But under this circumstance, let's say they come back to the table with $1,000 check. What do we do then? So let's say a couple months go by. Let's say it's like March 15th, something like that, a few months later. And the dude shows up with a check. And you're like, wait a second, I wrote you off 3 months ago, and here you are with the check. Weird. Okay. I'll tell you what you don't do. You don't say, sorry, buddy, we wrote off your account. We don't want your money anymore. No. You're taking the check, right? So debit cash will be a part of this because you're getting cash. But before I even, as an accountant, before I put the cash on the books, what I want to do is I want to reverse this journal entry. I just want to say that January 15th entry, that was a screw up. Let's just reverse it. Let's just pretend it didn't happen. And how does an accountant pretend something didn't happen? They do this thing called the reversing entry. And reversing entry is just like it sounds. Oh, I credited AR before? Let's debit AR. Let's flip this thing over. Debit AR, ABC company for $1,000. And we'll credit the allowance to say, hey, I thought I was using up some of my allowance. I'm not. That allowance goes back into the pot with the rest of my allowance for doubtful accounts. Okay, so now my AR is back on the books. It's almost like this entry didn't happen. This January 15th entry did not happen. So what do? Well, now it's just like we got paid for AR. So again, on March 15th, I don't know that I need to redate it, but I will just for fun. I debit cash to say, hey, these guys paid me cash. And that AR that I reinstated, that AR from ABC company, can go away now because they don't owe me the money anymore. So credit AR, ABC company for $1,000. And at that point, I have dealt with this properly. So again, I wrote off a company's account. I wrote it off right there. There's my write-off. Debit allowance, credit AR, and then they pay. So I say, oh, you know what? That write-off didn't happen. So I reverse the write-off. And then I just do a normal receipt, a normal receipt of cash. So that's like a normal payment there. All right, that's it, folks. That's what you do when a customer pays that you had previously written off. See you soon.